Today I wanted to record a devlog showing off my entity system I've been working on for my project Freestyle Arena. Basically, it's very similar to systems that you would see in games like Quake or Doom. If you've played either of those games or you've worked with their level editors, you'll probably be very familiar with a lot of these concepts. So you can see in these entities, it has a list of attributes that basically dictate how the entity is going to work, what type of entity it is, what it acts on. The system is highly extensible, flexible, and capable of producing just about any kind of game logic you might want with minimal engine code intervention, meaning you don't need to go into the engine code and write a new feature just to make a new entity work. You can write one script and it'll work for that entity, and some entities allow you to compose a new entity with modules called functions, and we'll take a look at that later. The basic trigger entity is the cornerstone of the system since it has the most features and is the most extensible. You can see here this one has a list of functions, which we'll take a pretty close look at later. This one has some custom attributes for specific behavior that it implements via those functions. And the other cool thing about triggers is that they can signal to other entities and themselves, which can create a kind of chain of logic, meaning any other game object can receive a signal and propagate it to the next one. So this means that you can have behavior that's kind of more sophisticated than just a basic one-shot, this entity triggers another entity, that sort of thing. So let's take a look at an example here. This is a basic trigger with a door. This trigger basically just sends the use message to target door 3. And this is door 3. It looks in the workspace for things named door 3. And it will send a message to that actor saying use. And we'll take a bit of a closer look at what that means later. But if I touch this trigger, it will use the door. And when the door is used, it opens. Okay, simple as that. So that's a really basic example. Let's look at something a little bit more complicated. So this door is actually 2 doors. And if you notice, you can see that the attribute, it appears to only take 1 target. But if we look at this trigger, it can actually take a list of targets. And a lot of different attributes can take a list of parameters. We'll take a look at some other things that can take a list of parameters later. Condition is one of those. Condition is a new attribute that we're going to look at. And basically that is just a check for a global player state. So this pickup here is a conditional pickup. You can see from the type attribute, it is conditional, and the condition that it grants you is has keycard. So when you pick up this blue box, it will say that you have the keycard, and the door will let you in. So here we have the keycard and the door. If I touch the door now, it'll say that the condition hasn't been met for has keycard. But as soon as I pick up the keycard, the door will let me in, and it will trigger both doors by name. Okay, so here's a little bit more of an advanced example. This is the basic jump pad object. So this is the first usage we'll see of the function attribute. And the function attribute basically just takes a list of parameters that match a name of a module in a folder here called trigger functions. So basically this is what the jump pad trigger function looks like. Functions have 2 components. They have a behavior and a state. Basically the behavior is what the entity actually does, and the state is some more custom attributes that it grabs for later that aren't necessarily required for a basic entity or a basic trigger, but would be required for something more bespoke. So this one has power, direction, and preserve velocity. And those all would act as you would expect for a jump pad. That's where it will send you, how far it sends you. And preserve velocity will either set your velocity to 0 or it will allow you to jump off of it, preserving your velocity. So you can see that this one kind of sends you up in the air. And that's the jump pad. All right, here's the teleporter object. This one's a conditional trigger that has a condition, has keycard. It has 2 functions, teleporter and condition notifier. It also has a message where it uses a target. And the important thing, the most crucial thing about the system is that none of these are mutually exclusive features. They can all be composed and used in tandem as much as you want. You can have as many functions as you want, as many conditions as you want. You can have as many targets as you want that send a message. With the function system, you can extend the trigger into being whatever kind of game object you might actually want, without having to write a custom object that fetches attributes and, handles where the player is and all those different systems that you might want. It's all written for you. All you have to do is write a really basic thing. Here's the notifier function. It basically just prints something, which is similar to the condition notifier function here, which prints something if you have the conditions or if you don't. So conditions not met only prints if you haven't met the conditions. We'll take a look at that now. Here you can see it says conditions not met, and then it says return with the key card. So we'll get the key card. And here's the cool thing. It's really done three things at once here. One, it's teleported me. Two, it has checked if my conditions are true or false. And three, it's triggered this door. So really, you can do any number of things that you want with the triggers. They're very composable, they're very flexible, and they allow you to make any kind of game object that you might want. Or if you need something more advanced, then you can consider making your own entity, like a door. I wouldn't really want to make a trigger into a door. Let's look at the enemy spawner. So this is the enemy spawner entity. It's a unique entity. It has the type of enemy spawn, and the enemy type is noob. So this will spawn an enemy from replicated storage, the enemies folder. This is the noob. We'll take a look at it in a moment. So this trigger, it has pretty much everything that we've seen so far. It uses the noob spawn. The only difference is that, one, it has the one shot, which basically just means that it'll destroy itself when it's been used successfully, and it has the touchable attribute. Triggers can be used in three ways currently. They can be touched, which we've seen in all of the triggers so far. It's the default behavior. They can be used by the player by pressing the interact key while looking at it, and they can be triggered by other entities. So that allows for a pretty powerful expressive system where you can have an entity that triggers another entity, and you can kind of propagate your logic across multiple entities. You can use any number of entities from one entity, so you can spin up a bunch of entities, you can spawn a bunch of enemies from a bunch of spawners. You could probably write a trigger that instantiates a new spawner dynamically based on the game state. So let's take a look at how this enemy spawn works. So when you touch it, it says that you must return with the rocket launcher. So let's grab the rocket launcher. And simple enough. So as you can see, when you touch it, it says return with the rocket launcher. You get the rocket launcher. Once you actually touch it and you meet those requirements, it prints good luck, which is the conditions met, because it has the condition notifier function. It uses the enemy spawner, and the enemy spawner spawns an enemy. So let's take a look at the enemy spawner code. This is very simple. It basically just clones an enemy, puts it in the workspace. Here's what I mean by it can be used in three different ways. Here we have a source argument, and it checks if the source is trigger. Currently, this entity can only be triggered by a trigger. It can't be used and it can't be touched. If we look at the trigger code, it shows that the source can be either touch, player, or trigger. Touch means that it's been touched. Player means that it's been used with the use key. And trigger means that it's been triggered by another trigger. So that's about it for my entity system. That's what I've been working on the past few days. I'm really proud of how it turned out, and I'll be continuing to add features to it. That's about all I have.